Okay, my name's Evan Scheibel for AE Toots Plus, and in this tutorial we're going to take a look at integrating 3D elements with our motion graphics pieces. Now, I want to make clear right at the outset that this is a tutorial for the beginner, not necessarily at After Effects, but the beginner at integrating 3D with their After Effects projects. So if you're already familiar with this is going to be covering a lot of the basic technique that's involved. We're not necessarily focusing on the final product, although we will come to a decent looking final product. That's not our primary focus. Our primary focus in this tutorial will be the technique that gets us there. So if you're advanced and you've done this, and you're farther along than most people, you might as well not watch, because it'll just be kind of a waste of time. But if you're new at integrating 3D and using 3D Studio Max to do that, well, this tutorial's for you. And I know that most people on CG Toots are familiar with this, but I have noticed that a lot of people have been requesting, not necessarily on AE Toots Plus, but around the internet in general, a lot of people have been requesting tutorials on integrating 3D with After Effects. So here's a tutorial that I hope will answer some questions. Now, my main compositing app is not After Effects. I usually use Nuke because I'm more of a visual effects type person. But I've dabbled around in After Effects. I've done my fair share of motion graphics work. So this is my attempt at a tutorial in After Effects. So let's get started here. This is what we're going to be working on right here. Let me tilde this in here, and we'll do a quick RAM preview of this. We've got a few things going on here. Fairly simple, but you can see what's going on. I'll let it load here. Okay, so we've got some dust floating around there. We've got the Pebble flashing, gives us our title switch. We've got the Pebble falls down past the camera, hits the table or whatever that is, and you can see when it falls the next time we've got the shadow that falls with it as well. Matches perfect. We've got the little AE Toots logo here, and a lot of stuff in here that makes this scene what it is, that you probably aren't even noticing until you see it in the comp. So let's look at what we've got in our comp here and kind of go through and turn some things off and on so we can see what's going on here. So obviously we've got the text here and some different things, but we've got a vignette there. We've got some grunge added to our texture. We have our titling. We have our texture. And we have back here, you can see right here, we've got just some random wording just to give it some style. We've got our AE Toots logo, some customization done in there to make it look grungy. We'll look at that in a minute. We've got our flashes that are just very simple to do for this application. And then we have our pre-comp, which is our Pebble. Now this is a little more complex because it wasn't made in After Effects. We've had to import that. So what we've got is, let me turn on a white background here. We've got our Pebble on a transparent background with the shadow that follows it. We'll look at how to create this in just 1 second. I'm going to fly through most of this just because most of you do know your way around After Effects pretty well. So let's get started right into 3D Studio Max, and we will get going with this here. So let me bring that up. Here's our scene as it looks in 3D Studio Max. Pretty simple setup. What we're going to mainly look at is Reactor and how to utilize Reactor, in this scene in order to use it in After Effects and get some realistic looking physics. So I'm going to just file and then reset and not save. Yes, I really want to reset. Okay, and I am going to Alt-W, bring this up here. Okay, and the first thing I'm going to do is create a box. Now the reason I'm creating a box and not a plane is because reactor doesn't work very well with planes. You get some really funny things going on. So we're going to use a box to give reactor the necessary information it needs. So that's pretty much it. And then I'm going to grab a sphere. I'm going to drag the sphere out here, hit W, and drag it up. Alright, now pretty simple. I'm going to come in, just zoom in on the sphere here, and hit F4 to bring up edged faces. With this up, what I'm going to do is come into my edit panel, and I'm going to bring my segments up until I think they're about where I would need them to be. I would say 80 should do it. Yeah, that should be pretty good. And then I'm going to right click on the object, and I'm going to go to convert to editable poly. Okay, now what I'm going to do is right click again and come to vertex mode. And now I'm going to orbit to the top and select this one vertex right here. Let me bring this over. And what we're going to do is go into soft selections here, and let me minimize all this so we have some room. I'm going to roll out my soft selection rollout, and I'm going to click this box that says use soft selection. Now you can see we get kind of a rainbow color on here. That's the fall off representation for our selection. So we can see if we manipulate our fall off, that's what we're going to be affecting and how much it's going to be affected. If you ever watch the weather, you'll know that if it's red, it's going to be affected a lot. If it's blue, it won't be affected very much at all. So this right around in here should be good, just so it's a little over halfway down. You'll see why when we bring this down. We're just kind of trying to make this a little pushed in. We'll come to the bottom and do the same thing. We'll select that one bottom vertex, and we will bring it up in there, and maybe adjust our fall off just a bit, and bring it in some more, just so it looks kind of like a hard candy, or maybe a Werther's or something like that. And bring that in, dent it in, and maybe we'll do some funny other ones here, and just so we get an odd shape that is going to bounce around for us nice. Maybe lift this up a bit. That looks good. And we will come to top level, and I'll zoom out to everything here. Okay, so now we've got our funny pebble. So what we want to do is select all this. But first, you'll see on the bottom of my Mac's viewport here, I have a toolbar that I can scroll around in. Now, that's my reactor toolbar, and if you don't have that already set up in your viewport toolbar somewhere, just right-click anywhere over in your toolbar, and make sure you have reactor selected. If I unselect it, it goes away. So just make sure that's selected, and that will bring up this toolbar. That's really the best way to work with your reactor, because it brings everything into a handy spot for you to work with here. So I'm going to just select everything I've just created here, and then I'm going to tick this box here, and what that does is it creates a rigid body collection. So I'm going to come out, and then I'll just move this icon off to the side. It doesn't really matter where that is. I'm going to bring this guy up a little bit more, and then because I already know kind of how this is going to be set up, I'm going to scale this out and make this box bigger this way. It doesn't really matter how big, you just don't want it to be too small, because our camera is going to be in here and you're not going to be able to see the edges anyhow. So I'm going to even make this a little bigger here. Okay, and now I'm going to come in and select just my pebble, and I'm going to come down into my rigid body toolbar. I'm going to pick this little box right here, and that's going to allow me to add physical properties to this pebble. And what I want to do is give it some mass and some elasticity. Now, mass is going to make it be reactive to gravity, and the elasticity is how much it's going to bounce. So I'm going to give it probably a 2 mass pound, whatever it is that the units, and I'm going to make the elasticity, I will say 1.25. Okay, now I'm going to preview this, and I want you to see something right off the bat. Yeah, I'm going to preview this right now, Now I want you to watch how it collides and how far away from the box here it stays. Guess you can't really see, but if you zoom in here you can kind of see that it didn't actually hit the box. And if we create our animation, it says it can't be undone. That's not necessarily true. We'll let this create, and now if we come in here until it hits and we zoom in, you can see that it's not really hitting. So what we want to do is come into our utilities right here, our utilities panel, and we want to push reactor. Now this is going to give us all of our options, kind of our global options for reactor. We want to come into our Havoc 1 world, I think. Actually no, collisions, sorry about that. And in our collisions we have what's called collision tolerance. Right, where are we at here? Alright. Maybe it was in the world here. Okay, collision. I was looking for the word collision. Sorry about that. So right here, we want to change this to about 0.25, about half of what it was. And then just make sure you come to the first frame, press home on the keyboard, and take all these keyframes, just delete them. And then we'll zoom right out here. Okay, and we're going to just go ahead and create the animation again. Alrighty. Okay, and now if we grab our thing here, zoom in on it, you can see pretty good. It's it looks pretty good. That's good enough. Usually I'd have to come in and hand animate it, but that looks good. But what we want to look for is how this bounces, and that's perfect. It gives us one little revolution in the bounce, and it came out pretty good first try. So that looks nice. Okay, now what we want to do is look at our materials. We want kind of a shiny red material for this, or whatever color you choose, depending on how you use it. Or if you're not going to use it, hey, whatever it is that you're doing, you can add a shader yourself. So I'm going to bring up my material editor, and in I think my second slot, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Final Render actually. So let me first bring up my render tab. Alright, and I'm going to come down to the bottom, assign renderer, and it's already set to final render. Alright, so I'm going to make sure that my anti-aliasing is on. I can bring it down a bit to about 40, I would say. And that looks good. Let me render out a frame. Maybe once we get a shader on it, it'll look a little better. So let's really fast, we'll drop our gray material from our first slot. In our second slot, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a new material. I'm going to actually grab the car paint material. And this is a pretty self-explanatory, straightforward shader. I'm just going to change my diffuse color to a dark reddish color. That should be good. And down in my sheen, I'm also going to change that to a darker reddish type color. A little bit lighter. Okay. And specular, I'm going to make it a little darker. Alright, and then we have a couple more things we want to look at, and that's the metallic. I'm going to make the metallic size about 0.25. That's like the little aluminum shards you see in the paint or whatever those are. Just a little bit of glitter in there. I'm going to change the amount to 50, and that should be good. And now what I'm going to do is apply this material to the pebble. Turn off edged faces for now. I'm going to come to my top view and render out a frame and see what we've got. And if we zoom in, we can kind of get a look at our shader. We can even stand to make that just a bit smaller. So our size will make about 0.1, and we'll give that a look here. Looks a little bit better. Probably even, well, let's change the amount to 75. And render it out again. Make it a bit smaller, 0.025. That looks good because when we zoom out, you'll see it's going to look nice. Alrighty, so once we get some lights in here, it's going to change things dramatically. So let's Alt W, and I'm going to come to my front view. Really, any orthographic view is fine. I'm going to create a new light, just a standard light, a target spot, and I'm going to drag this out about right here. And I'm going to hold Shift and copy this light over here. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is grab this one, turn shadows on. And then I'm going to make sure shadows are off on this one, which is okay. I'm going to grab my top view and just take a look at what we've got here. Alright, we've got the shadow here, but what we want to do now is grab this first light, and we want to come into our spotlight parameters. We want to just pull this way out so we don't really have those circles. We'll do the same here. Pull this way out. So now you'll see when we render this out, all we get is our shadow. That's what we want. Okay, so in my perspective view, hit Alt W again, and I'm going to bring up to the top here. And we want to kind of, well, let's just Control C, which is going to create a camera from our view. So I'm going to come back out here, and I'm going to make this viewport here my camera. I'm going to bring this one back to my perspective. You can also just hit P on the keyboard. Alright, and what I want to do now is bring the camera target down right to the ground, and then I want to also bring my camera down so the pebble is past it. Now you can see though, if you watch our camera view, you know, we've got a slight problem here with size. So the easy way to fix that without having to redo an animation or resize our pebble is to grab our target camera and bring our FO view out just a bit. About right there should do it. You can see now we can just kind of bring this camera down a little bit more here. And now we get this falls right past our camera, hits and bounces. And that looks pretty nice. Okay, and you can see now if we render our camera view, really nice looking shader, and we've got our shadow there. We can bring this out a little bit. There we go, and the shadow works nicely with it. Now, we don't have to worry about multipass with this because it's not too complex, but we do want to get our shadow to render nicely without having anything in the bottom. So what I'm going to do is select this, I'm going to hit M, and in this first material slot, I'm just going to come here and click on Standard, and I'm going to pick Matte Shadow. Right here, this matte shadow material. I'm going to apply that, and then I'm going to right click on the box here, go to Object Properties, and I'm going to make sure that I tick See-Through. Hit OK. Alrighty, now that makes it see-through in the viewport. That shouldn't matter too much because we're about done with Max. So let me check our camera. Okay, we've got this here. And now you're not going to be able to see anything because the shadow is obviously black, but it's there. The black is good because when we render this, that means it's transparent. And our shader's looking really nice. You could even maybe make these metallic dots a bit smaller. Okay, so now we've got that. Now what we want to do is set up our render. So I'm going to hit F10, bring up my render box, my render parameters here. Okay, now to render this out with, there's two ways you can go about it. One, you can render as a QuickTime movie in animation format, and make sure that you set it. I can show you here. We'll go to our Common tab and come down here, Files. There's a few ways you can go about it. If you hit Movie and then you hit Save, it's going to bring your setup box up here. Now, if you want the transparency to be saved, you make sure you set it to animation, and then millions of colors plus. And what that is it makes it millions of colors, which is the best setting, and then the plus means it also renders out the alpha channel. So everything black will be transparent. In this case, the background. That's one way to go about it. That's not necessarily the way I recommend or choose myself, simply because I'm used to working with high-end compositing applications that work best with image sequences, simply because there's a lot of analyzing going on, and rather than separate out frames, it can just take each image at a time. And there's numerous other reasons, but so I choose to render as a PNG sequence. So if you just choose PNG, hit Save. Alpha channel, make sure that's ticked, and RGB 48-bit. Hit OK. And it'll render an image sequence. The best way to do it also is to go into your create a brand new folder for the image sequence and render it out into that folder. That way you don't get confused with other things. So just set your size and your range. Most likely you don't have to set the range the entire 100 frames. For this scene, you could probably get away with about 60 because we're going to freeze frame that last frame anyway in After Effects. So set your range 0 to 60 and hit render, and it'll output your file just as you need it to be, and I will see you in After Effects.